Well, let's continue the conversation then on commodities. The US reimposing sanctions on Iran earlier this morning. Edward Jerian is the former US ambassador to Syria and Israel, the former head of Occidental Petroleum as well, and the director of the Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice University, and he joins us from Houston. Ambassador, was this the right move from the United States?
Well, it's a foreign policy move and a strategic move, really, to continue to put pressure on Iran. It has more of a political motivation than it does a economic motivation. The economics of sanctions on Iranian oil is to put pressure on the regime so that it will comply with changing its behavior in the region.
In your experience, do such motivations, cause a country like Iran to comply?
The Iranians have been very deft throughout their history in living with sanctions and avoiding the full impact of sanctions by, if we could use the word, leakage. And I think that's what they're going to be doing going forward. And there are various avenues in which they can do that. However, the sanctions that the Trump administration is imposing are very serious ones. They're biting ones. It'll take 1.5 million barrels a day of Iranian oil off the export markets. That represents something like 5% of the global export market. And that might be a problem if the oil markets, the energy markets were tight. But the energy markets, the oil markets are not tight. The U.S. production has been, as you well know, at full capacity, ramped up. The Saudis have indicated that they're going to continue the flow of oil. So the markets are not tight, and therefore, I don't think that this is going to have at least in the near term, a major impact on the markets.
Ambassador, good morning. It's Guy Johnson in London. One of the critical things that the energy market is trying to figure out right now is that there have been 8 countries that have been allowed waivers, but we're still waiting to find out exactly what the details are surrounding how many barrels we're talking there. How many barrels would you expect those waivers to include?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen the fact sheet that Secretary Pompeo said that there'll be some more information coming out on these waivers. But as you know, there's a number, 8 countries. And these waivers, by the way, are temporary. They have a 6-month timeline. And he indicated that 2 countries are already complying. So we'll see what they impact. But I have no idea what the numbers are.
Yeah, you bring up the issue of the timeline and the temporary nature of these. The Obama administration, I think, required a 20% reduction over 6 months for those countries with waivers to comply. I would imagine that the Trump administration would look to be doing that a little bit quicker. Would you imagine that as well? Do you think like 20%, maybe a little bit more, maybe 25% would be a number we'd be looking at?
I think so. I think that's probably in the range, and Secretary Pompeo indicated that they're going to be driving hard on this, and he mentioned that 2 countries already have ceased importing oil. So I think Iranian oil. So I think basically what you're going to see is the administration pushing the other 6 to comply at a more effective timeline.
Ambassador, EU, German, UK, and French officials last week said they deeply regret that this is happening. They're going to continue to do business with Iran. How does this impact US-EU relations?
Well, there's a major difference, obviously, in a rift between the United States and the Europeans on the whole idea of the JCPOA, the nuclear deal that President Obama's administration struck. I mean, this is a fundamental difference between our European allies, the P5+1, as you know, that includes Germany and the members of the UN Security Council. This is a major policy difference between the United States and Europe. And China and Russia. So the whole issue is whether or not the JCPOA was a strategic gain for the world in limiting Iran's nuclear weapons capabilities, albeit for a short term, 10 to 15 years. That's the fundamental issue. What the Trump administration is saying is that it was a badly negotiated deal, that it did not impact on Iran's negative behavior in the region, be it supporting various groups like Hezbollah or supporting the Houthis in Yemen, or it's the Shiite militias in Iraq. So through the vehicle of oil and sanctions on oil, the Trump administration is putting, if you will, strategic pressure on Iran to change its behavior. Now, it's anyone's guess if these sanctions will change the Iranian regime's behavior in the region. What bothers me is that sanctions alone, while they can be an effective instrument, if there is no area of discussion between the United States and Iran as to changing its behavior, it seems that pressure alone, I do not think, is going to achieve its end.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Crude oil at $64.04 a barrel right now. Edward Jerian, former U.S. ambassador to Syria and Israel, former chairman of Occidental Petroleum and director of the Baker Institute of Public Policy at Rice University.